This is Uncensored Conservatism, episode 159, continuing to look at Project 2025 and what's in it. We're going to look at chapter 18 today, and which is about the Labor Department. It was authored by Jonathan Berry, who worked in both the Labor and Justice Departments previously. It should be obvious by now, Project 2025 calls for the elimination of so-called DEI efforts in the Labor Department. It notes that equality and non-discrimination is the law, while DEI is not. It's a policy that pushes an agenda of victim and oppressor. Hence, all those little training sessions telling people that they have unacceptable privilege and oppress others goes away. It wants to eliminate the EEOC's collection of racial and ethnic data, which can then be used to bring a charge of discrimination under the theory of disparate impact. In fact, in other areas of Project 2025, it argues that disparate impact claims should simply be eliminated. Disparate impact measures outcome, not the discriminatory intent on the part of employers. Federal contractors have to commit to non-discrimination pursuant to an executive order signed by this guy. All right, no problem. That was in 1965. That's what the EEOC is for. But because of disparate impact claims, contractors and the government are now forced into an unspoken quota system for the workforce. To avoid the claim of disparate impact, you simply hire some minority regardless of merit or ability. Now, there is a misconception on the part of the administration of this thankfully gone idiot over a Supreme Court decision. That decision is the Bostock one, which held that an employer cannot fire someone simply because they are gay or transgender. But Biden took the decision further and expanded it beyond the employment context to include bathrooms, locker rooms, and even dress codes. Simply, the Bostock decision should not apply to anything other than hiring and firing. Now listen, if some transgender does their job and does it well, who the hell cares? But if the transgender sucks at their job or is making people feel uncomfortable, then you need to get rid of the freak. In fact, when it comes to sex discrimination, it should be based on the actual sex of the person, male or female, not the plethora and the alphabet soup of dyed-haired weirdos, like this one. In dealing with the pro-life theme of Project 2025, it notes that the Pregnancy Discrimination Act should be vigorously enforced. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, likewise, which requires that reasonable accommodations be afforded to pregnant workers, should be vigorously enforced. And the American with Disabilities Act affords some protections for women suffering a disability from pregnancy or childbirth. And not a single one of these laws, which help protect pregnant women in the workplace, require that employers provide insurance for elective abortion or make any accommodations for those who have elective abortions. Of course, employer is free to provide coverage for elective abortion, but if they do, they must provide equal coverage for pregnancy, childbirth, maternity, and adoption. Now, some death merchants, I mean the pro-choice crowd, have argued that after the Dobbs decision, the ERISA law trumps that decision, and states should be allowed to mandate insurers cover elective abortion procedures. The Department of Labor needs to determine that ERISA does not block such actions by states. Hey, if you want an abortion, pay for it. As mentioned in another episode, the Biden administration has an animus against people of faith, especially those holding traditional values. Religious organizations and employers should be allowed to run themselves as they see fit in a non-discriminatory manner. That is, you cannot just not hire all blacks or all women or whatever it is. That would clearly be discrimination. But employees of religious employers know the ground rules going into that employment. Straying from those ground rules is a legitimate cause for termination. The head of the EEOC should not issue unilateral decisions and findings, and the whole commission should vote on such. Also, the EEOC often enters into consent decrees and assumes a power which they lack in the law. Lower and middle income workers tend to be in jobs that require overtime pay for anything over 40 hours in a week. How about instead of paying that employee time and a half for anything over 40 hours, they get the option of accumulating time and a half in paid time off? You know who has that option now? These guys, public sector workers. We can encourage on-site child care services by simply noting that the service provided is not an employee benefit, and the employer could actually receive a financial incentive for on-site care. There are limitations on contributions to a 401k or other employer-provided program. In 2023, that limit was $23,500. But a single earning worker in the family without access to a 401k type program could only contribute $6,500 to an IRA. Why? Just equalize them. In fact, Project 2025 says to double the limits. As it is, calculations are just too complicated, but they, in effect, disadvantage married couples. They're based on relative contributions to the household income. A married household is a married household, and isn't that what we want? Project 2025 argues that the consumer price index should be made more realistic. Currently, food is weighted at 13.4% of the index, and energy as 6.9%. That means that 79.6% is not food or energy prices. But these are exactly the two things that directly affect the average household every month. So what's in the other categories? Well, there's housing. Okay, a mortgage or rent is kind of important. Then there's transportation, but not everyone buys a car every month. Education, well, not everyone is a college student, and not every parent buys crayons or notebooks for their kids every month either. Apparel, not everyone goes clothes shopping every month. Travel and recreation, I mean, seriously? Medical expenses, but not everyone sees a doctor every month. And other goods and services. Again, not everyone buys a refrigerator, a television, or a hot water heater every month. The CPI should reflect those items that affect the average American every month, mainly food, energy, and housing. We can argue about what gets measured in each category later. Now, this is one I disagree with, and that is paying people time and a half for working on their Sabbath. I mean, maybe some atheists will suddenly find religion for the extra bucks. But other than that, I mean, employers should just make accommodations. Overtime for telework should only apply if one works more than 10 hours in a day or 40 hours in a week, because telework is rife with abuse, folks. Just ask any government worker in D.C. now crying about having to show up in their office. And if telework from the comforts of your home is to be, then OSHA regulations should not apply. Chapter 18 talks a lot about independent contractors like Uber and DoorDash drivers. Most of these people come from all races and ethnicities, and they rely on the burgeoning business to supplement income, but there's efforts to kill the industry in its infancy. There's currently uncertainty. At least the level of control a person exerts over their work should determine whether they are an employee or an independent contract. Maybe some labor regulations can be relaxed on small businesses. Revenue thresholds for when labor regulations take effect on employers are rooted in the reality of 1935, not 2025. Apprenticeships are very important and should be encouraged because, face it, not everyone is college material. Religious organizations should also be encouraged to enact apprenticeship programs. And employer grants of up to $10,000 should be considered for those that have demonstrably good on-the-job training programs. Many jobs in government require a bachelor's degree when none may be necessary. Now, of course, you don't want someone off the street being an engineer, but there's many jobs that don't require a college degree. And to those with college degrees who do a pretty shitty job. Abuse of the unemployment compensation system is a must where states should share information on recipients and with the federal government. I mean, basic, you could be receiving Social Security benefits in New Jersey and working in New York. Things like work councils in lieu of unions should be considered. Perhaps certain businesses should have non-voting employees on their board of directors. Private sector unions have to file detailed financial reports with the Department of Labor, but unions composed of state or local employees are exempt. Why? The purpose of unions is to protect the workers, and political conflicts of interest are a violation of their fiduciary responsibility to their members. The National Labor Relations Board can issue injunctions, but the rules for doing so should be transparent. Now, card check or secret ballot for unionization. The answer is obviously a secret ballot after both sides, both the union and the employer, present their views and proposals, and the workers then decide. The Bacon-Davis Act should be repealed. This drives up the cost of all government construction and repair costs by 10%. Just get rid of it. Project 2025 suggests limits on 501c when it comes to political advocacy, but I have some problems with this, and I'll explain it in another episode at another time when I'm not talking about Project 2025. Occupational licensing recognition in interstate compacts should not come with additional requirements. Also called environmental social governance, or ESG, should be eliminated and not be considered under ERISA. The purpose of pensions is a fiduciary one, not one of ending climate change. Requiring that healthy pension funds divest from fossil fuel investments is not a fiduciary function. Likewise, many pensions invest in Chinese entities that are not subject to U.S. accounting controls. Remove state and local government pension funds from investment through companies like BlackRock and State Street Global Advisors, and this would be a good start also. The retiree cares more about this than they do about this, and rightfully so. The H-2A visa program applies to temporary foreign agricultural labor, and it should be gradually eliminated over a 10-year period, and the person needed replaced by upgrades in agricultural technology to increase productivity. Likewise, Project 2025 calls for a gradual elimination of the H-2B visa program over a 10-year period. The workforce of any federal contractor should be composed of at least 70% American citizens initially, and eventually increase to 95% within 10 years. On the international front, we should oppose any form of forced or compulsory labor, and I'm looking at China here. Because of cheap and abundant labor abroad, and thanks to an embrace of globalization, American workers have suffered. It's not protectionism to put the American worker first in line when it comes to labor policy. Now, there's more technical stuff about independent contractors, pension plans, and unions in Project 2025, and I've only highlighted some of the bigger items. Obviously, organized labor may not like some ideas, but unions are a relic of a bygone era in America anyway. They are not the answer for the American worker. A common sense labor policy that puts the American worker and citizen first is the answer. And that's it for Chapter 18. Have a great day and a more pleasant tomorrow.